Hello and good evening. So welcome to MBA Wallah, and I'm your personal coach where you and I sit down together and talk about all things English. So we started this journey quite a few weeks ago. We have actually had a couple of RC sessions all together already. But then we started a new series where we are focusing on the absolute basics. We worked on verbal ability in the last class, and this is the class where we look at the other half, or if I were to be even more precise, the other 2/3 of the VARC section. So that's going to be on our agenda today. So you tell me, do you have any question before I start? Is there anything that you want to ask? Any concerns? So we have Neeru, Varsha, Tanishka, Shyam. Some of you are already here. That's absolutely fantastic. And of course, Atharv, who does not miss out an opportunity on attending every session. So that's wonderful. That's really nice. What else? Okay, so let's go ahead and start our journey together then. Okay. So we are talking about mastering reading comprehension. There are a few things that you and I have already talked about in our sessions a couple of weeks ago. So let us go ahead and begin there. If you want to master reading comprehension, and mastering it is going to be so useful to your journey overall. I mean, come to think of it, 16 questions, yes, 16 out of 68 questions in the entire exam are directly reading comprehension questions. On top of that, all the VA questions also require you to understand them. Not only that, even when you go to LR and some of the quant questions, the very first ability that you need is to read and understand. So its utility, its usefulness cuts across the sections, and it's not limited to just the CAT exam. I can very safely tell you that 25%, at least 25% of your entire CAT is actually RC. Can you beat that? We are talking about an area that contributes 1/4. In terms of marks, almost 1/4, but in terms of utility, at least 1/4. It's all comprehension. So how do we go on to master this? How do we become really good at it? Tell me. क्या करना चाहिए? What is it that we should do in order to go ahead and ace it? And this is of course our English medium channel, right? If I do switch into Hindi, just do remind me that we are on the English medium channel. I'm just making this mental switch. I've just come from a batch where I was teaching bilingually, so we at times end up slipping into it. So absolutely yes, Tina says, yeah, we should read, definitely. Neeru, if philosophy is something that bothers you, then all it means is that you need to read more on philosophy. Read, absolutely. So let me put it in a more generic manner. Let's start with something more generic. At the end of the day, you are preparing for an exam which happens to have a component called reading, reading comprehension, unseen passages. So the very first thing that you and I should ideally do is figure out the syllabus. So for every exam, that's what you do, right? You figure out the syllabus and then you start taking care of that syllabus. So what is the syllabus of RC? Or in other words, what should you do so that you start getting every single RC question right? So I'll tell you 3 major things that you can work on. So the very first is you can work on your reading speed. So many of us generally around the month of July start asking about, how do I attempt more questions? How do I reduce the time that it takes me to attempt questions? So if you somehow work on increasing your reading speed, then that is something that can help you. Now the other very obvious thing will be comprehension. So in case you attempt passages and you realize that you're getting the comprehension based questions wrong, particularly those questions that test your comprehension in a very direct manner. You've seen these questions, right? They're called idea restatement questions. In case you haven't, these are the questions where the examiner will pick up a sentence from the passage and will give to you as it is. And the question will ask you, what does the author mean by this sentence? What is the author trying to convey when he says this sentence? And then you will have these 4 answer choices which will try to capture the idea of that particular sentence using different set of words. So if you don't get those right, then you know that comprehension is definitely a factor for you. So if you enhance your ability to understand, it is going to make you more accurate. And then apart from that, I can tell you that there are some question types which are used by every exam. So I have been teaching people for 25 years now, and I've taught for various exams. And when I sit down and write down the sum total of different question types across exams, then I know that there are these 21 odd different question types that examiners have. That's it. Not every exam uses all of them. Even if I talk about the CAT, I'd say 11, 12 of them are important. The rest of them can probably be left out, can be considered fringe question types, if you may. So you can treat each one of those question types as a chapter for you to master as part of the syllabus. So here is the third bit. Understand every question type in terms of what is it that it tests, how should you approach it, what is going to be a good way of eliminating close answer choices in each one of those question types, and then there can be more, right? So these 3 are obviously going to be the major elements of this entire process. And a little while ago, somebody said, so Neeru said she's struggling with philosophy. So you notice, basically she has identified a core area. She says that her comprehension drops down when she reads a passage based on philosophy. So if a particular subject, a particular genre bothers you, you know that you of course need to fix the familiarity. When the other thing that you can do is use the right approach. That's something that I in fact talked to you some 3 weeks ago, where let me just, in case you attended that session, let me just jog your mind. So when you attempt RCs, what should you do? You should read the passage first or the questions first. Athar, which slot are you talking about? Okay, so a couple of weeks ago when we were talking, I told you that we would ideally want to read the passage first and not the questions first. And when it comes to reading the passage, once again, there is a specific method, a specific way that we talked about, and that was, when you read the passage, your goal is to generate a mental overview. Your goal is not to read the passage in detail. And you would want to do that ideally in under 2 minutes. Okay. So in case you are somebody who has this tendency to read the questions first, that a lot of us have. Mind you, unseen passages in schools, it makes sense to go through the questions first. But there are certain limitations of that method. It is not suitable for an exam like the CAT or the XAT, and therefore let's not get into that bad habit. Okay, if you want to know more, you can go check that session out, and then have a very clear-cut plan to develop the skills that are required to ace RCs. And in these classes, I can give you a lot of knowledge. I can talk about a lot of different techniques. But unfortunately, I cannot transfer my skills to you. I can show you the path, but then you need to walk that path in order to go ahead and master those skills. So make sure that you develop those skills, and they can be developed through extensive and eclectic reading done in a very specific way. And when I say eclectic, it essentially means reading a lot of different genres and types And if you want to know more about where to read, what kind of things to read, I took a session a couple of weeks ago where I talked about my top reading resources for the CAT. It is available on this channel. You can go ahead and audit that. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on a passage together. So the purpose today, because it's going to be a very foundational, very basic class, the purpose today is for you and me to work together and we try to figure out what it is that can bother you, what it is that can affect your performance in RCs. So you ready? So here's the passage one. So normally, I think some of you have been working with me for quite a while, and you know that we generally attempt passages in 2 rounds. One round where you attempt the passage, second round where you and I work on it together. But this is going to be different. Let's read it together and then we'll go to the questions. And in the process, we'll try to diagnose what it is that we are missing out on. And at least that will give you an inkling of what it is that you are supposed to do. So here is a passage. It is divided into 4 slides. Why don't you go and read this, and once you're done reading it, let me know and then I'll ask you a couple of questions. Go on. All yours. Done? Okay, excellent, Sham. Excellent. All right. So now that you've read it, a little while ago I told you that you're supposed to read the passage and generate a mental overview. So one key element of that mental overview is to write down what every paragraph stands for. So let me ask you, you've read the first paragraph. Is there anything in the first paragraph that you could not understand? And can you condense the first paragraph into a single sentence or a single bullet point? What is the first paragraph about? Can you give me the gist of that? So what is the first paragraph about? Yes, Shivansh, indeed. Aman, absolutely. Whenever we work work on RCs together, whenever we pick up a passage together, we always do that. So even in YouTube sessions, every single answer choice that is picked by the students, I go ahead and we go ahead and analyze each one of those options in terms of what made it wrong and what made the right one right. We of course look at. So what is this about? So let's read. Is 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 a good writer? No. Even her books for adults written under the name GR have terrible prose style. So some people can get tripped here. Her sentences contain missing clauses, poor construction, confused tense and point of view, imprecise descriptions and poor word choice. From as far back as I can remember, I've always said that 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is not that great of a writer from a prose standpoint. So if I were to condense it, all it says is 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is not a good writer plus reasons. Plus reasons, right? When Scar Major does follow the standard hero's journey. Now, work with me here, work with me here. You notice this H is capital and this J is capital. What does that tell you? A capital H, a capital J, what does that tell you? Varsha, excellent. Tanishka, wonderful. Very precise. I loved those sentences that you crafted. So you notice this H, this J, this basically tells us that it is a proper noun. Now, if you're somebody who wants to learn about storytelling, narrative structures, you may have heard of this book called The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. So that book talks about certain things that happen in a hero's journey. Ordinary person, call to adventure, refusal of the call, meeting with the mentor, then crossing the threshold. And that is where that adventure starts. Tests, allies, enemies, then approaching the challenge, the ordeal, the reward, the road back, resurrection, return with the elixir. So typically, I mean, most of the popular stories that you would see will follow this arc. They'll have that arc. There is a man, ordinary person, and then he finds himself in situations where he needs to go beyond himself in order to conquer. Right? So that's how typically stories develop, reach the climax and then arrive at a resolution. So when you look at this hero's journey, that is what is being referred to here. In case you don't know that, it's okay. But then do notice that this H and this J, it tells you that it is a proper noun, which means that it has a very specific word. You cannot really interpret it literally in that sense, right? So scar major, similarly, you notice capital S, capital M, proper noun. So scar major does follow the standard hero's journey, and so it is entertaining to read. But I hope she is humble enough to admit that her fame is mostly luck. She wrote a story that resonated with the zeitgeist. What is this? At exactly the right time. So earlier in the day, you know that I have a Telegram group. Somebody sent me a message, a question, which says that, hey, there are these people on YouTube and some influencers who say that it is not necessary for you to work on vocabulary for the CAT. And I get it. There is no direct vocabulary based question in the CAT exam. But then, if you do not know the meaning of this word, will you be able to understand this sentence? Now see, is this sentence going to be necessary for you to answer a question? It may not. In fact, chances are that a single word will not even affect your performance in a question. But then, who knows, it may. So if you work on your vocabulary, if you go ahead and learn the meanings of these high frequency words, I think that puts you in a better position. So what is zeitgeist according to you? How do you answer it? So it is a word of German origin which means spirit of the time. Would you know what it means, by the way? Tell me, looking at your chat now. So you notice every particular era, every particular time period happens to have certain dominant cultural, religious, political themes that those periods are typically associated with. For instance, when I look at the world around me nowadays, it is defined by a very rapid tech-driven shift. AI is the zeitgeist of our time. Coming particularly to India, we are also looking at an entrepreneurial zeal. We are looking at a sort of to put it mildly, a resurgence of our cultural identity, those kind of things. For some people also religious identities, you notice. So she wrote a story that resonated with the zeitgeist at exactly the right time. Or in other words, here is a book, it had a story which happened to connect with the dominant theme of its era, spirit of that era. And that has very little to do with writing quality or marketing skills or anything under one's control. It's just luck, right? It's just luck. I've often pointed to the first Scar Major book as an example of her low quality writing. It reads like an early career first novel, and that is fine because it is. So once again, in this, he picks up a particular piece of work of this author, reiterates that she's not a good writer and says that she just got lucky. So second paragraph, 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄's Scar Major has poor writing, it succeeded because of luck. So you're getting the drift. So that's what we want. Poor writer, reasons. Scar Major, she got lucky with it. Not talent, but luck that made it successful. Okay. Let's read the next paragraph. Go ahead, go through this and then we'll talk. Let me know once you're done with it. Atharv, I don't think that can be the title, but since you have asked it, once we are done with the passage, we'll go ahead and work on this. Okay, done. Hi Santosh, थोड़ा लेट हो गया भाई. बता. So Varsha, what is this paragraph about? Go ahead. Capture the gist in a single sentence. जितना concise हो पाओ. Proper sentence frame करना भी जरूरी नहीं है. Bullet point type की structure भी लिखोगे. So even if it were a bullet point, it will work with me. We don't even need to construct or craft a proper sentence here. And bonus points for somebody who tells me what YA is. What is YA? Tell me. So it is a category of literature, films and media that are targeted at which particular category? People aged 12 to 18. So that's what YA is. It's known as, popularly called, young adult. So young adult is a category in literature, movies or media where the target audience is 12 to 18-year-old. So when he says, "Yaar, Scar Major is not a well-written book," people reply, it is YA. That is, it is young adult fiction. It is targeted at these people. And then they go on to say that she's a genius that gradually made her writing more sophisticated as the books went on, so that as readers aged, the reading level and maturity of the books grew with the audience. So they think she's a genius. Her first book was lousy, but then they thought that it is because it was targeted at people this age. And as these readers grew and become more sophisticated, she also made her writing more sophisticated. How brilliant, how genius is that? Okay, what does prose mean? Okay, so that's asked by Shivansh. Shivansh, you have poetry, poems. So you have poems, and then you have all these stories and novels which are not poems. So the ones which are not poetry are called prose. So all the pieces of writing which are not poetry are essentially prose. Okay. So Atharv, the bonus marks to you. So now the author of the passage is criticizing her, but her supporters say this. But then the author comes back and says, okay, but let us be honest. It is much more likely that she just got better as a writer as she wrote more. To examine this further, consider the novel The CC by GR, a pseudonym taken up by 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 while writing this novel much later on in her career. Much later on in her career. It is kind of shocking to me that a major publisher would let this get through without serious edits. I was so distracted by the prose errors. So there were a lot of errors in the writing. I could not even focus on the content. I know this is not something most people notice, but it serves as a good reminder that 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is not a good writer. She's famous. These are two different things. So if we were to condense this, what does it contain? Supporter's argument and then author's rebuttal. Supporter's argument and the author's rebuttal. So Varsha, there is no positive given by the author for 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 in terms of her writing. This, in fact, the supporters give a reason for why her writing is lousy, but then and justify it. 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 goes on to challenge that as well. So absolutely yes, Piyush, she is critical. Okay, and here comes the next one. So once you're done reading it, once again condense it into a very short sentence and then share it with me. And in case there is a part of the passage that you don't understand, do flag it, do highlight it in the chat so that I can dive deeper into that particular aspect. Absolutely, yes, Piyush. So basically, you notice the previous paragraph where he talked about a particular book, the CC by GR, where GR is nobody but 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is same person. So he picks up one sentence from that book called the CC. Though Eric's 32 years of life had seen their ups and downs, he had never before woken up in the certain knowledge that she would remember the coming day for as long as she lived. So he picks up a sentence and then tells you why it is wrong. She words it so the ears are the one seeing. Notice, though Eric's 32 years of life had seen their ups and downs. So it somehow implies that it must be Eric who has seen those ups and downs, but the sentence is written in such a way that it appears that the ears have seen the ups and downs and not Eric. See, this is nitpicky. He's saying, okay, I'm focusing on some very small details, but it is also confusing and imprecise. So if you don't understand why, it is because only a conscious thing can see something. Only Eric could have seen it. Ears could not see it. So when you nitpick, you pick up some really small details and criticize those. Okay, so that's nitpick, and from there you can move to nitpicky, a person who does that. Then also we begin with a subordinate clause. Now you notice we are getting into the world of grammar. So you know, clause is a group of words which is part of a sentence and it has its own subject, its own predicate. So there are two types of clauses, coordinate and subordinate. There are more, there are other classifications too. But if a clause is coordinate, then it means that it is as important as the other clauses of the sentence. It is coordinate essentially means equal. I shouldn't say other clauses because the other ones can be junior, but coordinate is an important clause. Subordinate is sort of a junior clause that depends on some other clause. And the author here is now getting into the world of writing. He's saying that he's beginning with a subordinate clause. This is by definition beginning with inessential or unimportant information. So if you start with unimportant information, it is going to make the sentence weak. Then the clause tries to cram in way too much information. So you notice, he had never before woken up in the certain knowledge that she would remember the coming days for as long as she lived. Lot of information. Further, this sentence reads like a first year creative writing student attempting to impress a teacher by making things needlessly complicated. It reads like a student who has not learned that this is exactly how agents and publishers can tell you are still an amateur. So this, as somebody has already said, provides us with an example of 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄's poor writing. Okay, And here comes the last paragraph. Should take you barely 15 seconds. Go ahead. Oh, Play with Dev has this struggle, huh? He has to choose between RC and algebra. Ah, yes, I'm sure some batch has its class going on for sure. Yeah. Done. So, once again, in the last paragraph, the author reiterates that 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is not a good writer and you cannot prove otherwise. Not a good writer, you cannot prove otherwise. So you notice, we read the entire passage, we condensed every paragraph into its gist. Now, do you remember it all? Do you remember it all? Do you still have it in your mind? That's a skill that you need to develop. So come to think of it, what was the very first paragraph about? 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is not a good writer plus reasons for it. Then the next paragraph was about what? We talked about scar major is poorly written, success due to luck. Success due to luck. Supporters argument and author's counter argument. Then what did we have? The CC example proving that she's a bad writer. And finally this paragraph, which once again says 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is a poor writer and you cannot convince me otherwise. Of the contrary. Yeah, you have nothing to convince me of the contrary. That's it. So Atharv, you remember a little while ago I told you that the title that you're giving is not the right one. This is why. Now that I have all these things, you notice this recurring theme. 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is not a good writer. That's what the author sets out to prove. That's it. It's an opinion based passage. It is about 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 and the author's opinion is 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is not a good writer. These are the details. And then there can be questions created from it. Now, in case there was a part of this passage that you could not understand, where when we worked on it together and I explained it, then you understood, then you know that there are certain aspects that you do need to work on. It could simply be that you need to increase your reading. It could be that you need to work on vocabulary. So be aware of these kind of things and then see whether you are able to do this job mentally or not. If not, then make it your second nature. Now let us dive into the questions. Here is the first one. What's your answer? So you are on YouTube, right? So you can go back. You can go back in time and refer to the passage. So make sure that you use the seeker and go back and then share the answer with me. So question number 1, what's your answer? I will start a timer. We'll not give it more than 90 seconds for sure. Okay, so let's see. I'm just using it as a timer for myself. Go ahead and share the answer. Okay, so I have Piyush's answer. Give me three more answers and then we can work. Okay, Ananya has shared her answer. So has Ipsita and Niru. Absolutely spot on, guys. So you are perfect. The correct answer is indeed B. And at this juncture, let me give you a piece of homework. The homework is, look at this question. This question picks up an example from the passage and then asks us for why this example was used. Okay, so I told you that there are these different question types used in RCs. One of those question types is the purpose of an instance question, the purpose of an example question. So here is a bit of homework for you. Why do we use examples? Now, the moment you know why we use examples, you will find it very easy to answer such questions even when they become difficult, even when they become challenging. Okay? So today you'll find these easy for two reasons. Number one, these questions aren't very difficult. And number two, you and I have worked on the passage together. Right? So that means that the comprehension is also enhanced. And that is why when we work, we don't work in one round, we work in two rounds where you give it your best and then I come into the scene. Okay, here is the next one. So you got the homework. Question number 2. Atharv already shared, the question itself told you that it is about the third paragraph. Okay, so A answer. Yogesh, you are on the wrong channel for that. If you did not see, this is called MBA Wallah English Medium. So we have a dedicated channel where we use English, and here is a channel where we use exclusively English. So absolutely right, the answer is A. Now, do you remember the part of the passage from where this question was created? So when you have that mental overview, this is the advantage. You are able to go to the right part really quickly. So this was given in the last paragraph, in fact, the last 3 lines, the last 3-4 lines. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back to that particular part. Here it is. Check this. I hear the pushback already. One can break the rules of prose style and be a great writer. Yes, but when a great writer breaks the rules, the prose becomes better than it would have been if the rules were followed. So, A versus C. Are the new rules created? Is it something that is given in the passage, Ananya? So the moment we go back to the right area, it becomes easy. So a lot of people, because they don't have that mental overview of the passage, they do not know which part to refer to, they end up reading the passage multiple times, hunting for the right location. Can help. So that's why A and not C, because C is not mentioned anywhere, A is. Here is the next one. Let me start the timer too so that we keep a track of this. Yogesh, there is hardly anything to understand in that. It's just a fact. All right. So is it C? So let us check. A. Scar Major is interesting as it was written when 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 was already an established writer. Two things. We know that she was not an established writer. In fact, it was her first book. So this part is false. Is it interesting? Yes, but it was interesting not because of this. It is interesting because it follows hero's journey. So there is a wrong reason attributed as well. So can we call this true? No, we can't. B. The author of the passage is an admirer of 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄's style of writing. Big no. We know that the author is very clearly against. Right? How about C? Being a famous writer is not the same as being a good writer. Mentioned in the passage? Yes. 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 writes exclusively for children. No. See, she started writing young adult, which means 12 to 18. Are these children? No. And then she continued to write as for this group as they grew further. So she definitely moved into the proper adult territory. So no. And that is why C. And here comes the last question. What is the reason behind 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄's fame? If you remember the relevant paragraph, please go back to that location, read it and then answer it. I will start the timer in the interim. Okay. So we're getting A, we're getting C, we are getting D. बहुत सारे अलग अलग आंसर आ रहे हैं भाई अपने पास. चलिए, तो क्योंकि बहुत सारे अलग अलग आंसर्स आ रहे हैं तो इसका मतलब यह है कि हमें पैसेज में वापस जाना पड़ेगा. आइए चलिए पैसेज में वापस जाते हैं जहां पे ये चीज दी हुई हो. So I am bringing you over to the second paragraph. So this book succeeded. Okay. Why? It has very little to do with writing quality or marketing skills or anything under one's control. So her success, can it be attributed to writing quality? No. Marketing skills? No. Anything under anyone's control? No. So her fame is mostly luck. Right? So now let us go to the question. A. 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 is a writer who represents the culture that the world looks up to. When you look up to something, it means that you respect something. You are inspired by it. Where does it say, the entire passage, that she represents the culture that the world looks to? The only place where the culture came into picture was the zeitgeist. So her novel represented the zeitgeist of her time, but yeah, zeitgeist is not always something that is positive. It is not always something that people look up to. So therefore, if you chose this because of that zeitgeist part, then we could not understand that particular part well. That tells us that we need to work on our comprehension. B. Everybody likes stories that reminds us of our childhood. Is she even writing about childhood? And B. Is she liked by everyone or only the 12 to 18-year-olds when she started writing? See, nobody objects to the glaring errors that 𝐅𝐑𝐄𝐄 commits. Okay, yes, there are plenty of people who don't object to it, but can we say nobody? Because the author very clearly does that. So can we say nobody? And number two, is that the reason behind her fame. Is she famous because nobody objects to her errors? She is famous because of luck. So it is mostly a matter of good fortune, that is luck, and that is why D over all the other answer choices. Atab says, Professor, don't forget your communication in Hindi at the English medium channel. I did not even use Hindi in the last 5 minutes for sure. Okay, so I did not. Somebody else has done that in the chat. I haven't. I slip into that character rather soon, rather early. So you notice why C cannot be the answer, because it is not given as a reason for her fame. It is a characteristics, yes, but not a reason. The reason provided in the passage was there in the second paragraph, around third line. And that is why D. So I hope now you know a little more about how we approach and how we diagnose our problems. And once you diagnose a problem, you are supposed to, of course, go ahead and fix that. So that's what I brought for you today. If you happen to have any more questions for me, head over to the Telegram group and ask those questions there. That's the QR code. This is the name. You can also search for the group by this name. And before I sign out, this is something that I want to leave you with. Every champion was once a contender that did not give up. So, you want to be a champion? Well, one of the things that you need to do is don't give up, particularly when the going gets tough. Okay, so that's where we stop today, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep working hard, and wherever you are stuck, drop me a line so that you and I can continue our work together. Take care and have a great time ahead.